Before we jump in, which I'll go through the agenda, we'll talk about kind of community norms and also just the basics of D&I, because I feel like many times it's lost. We throw around these terms, diversity and inclusion, and we have no idea what it means. And so I want to kind of step back a little bit, and even before jumping into strategy, saying, okay, what does this even mean for me? What does it mean for my life? What does it mean for our organization in itself? But the agenda for today is, and we did the welcome, talk about kind of community rules, because when you discuss diversity and inclusion, sometimes personal stories come out, sometimes, people's, experiences in talking about oppression and prejudice and whatever the topic may be comes out, and people become very vulnerable. So I want to make sure that this is a safe space. Obviously, you all work with each other, so you already have that rapport, but still recognizing that we need to be respectful of everyone's opinion, as well as, opening the floor to others and not, talking all the time, and allowing other people to discuss as well. Then I'm gonna, like I said, jump into the basics of diversity and inclusion. Then also kind of related to the design industry, because obviously that's what we work in, right? Like, while you may not be a practicing designer, you're a design administrator. And so the work that you do directly impacts designers across the nation, and in some cases across the world. So we want to look at how is this relevant within the space in which we're working. And then lastly, I want to do an activity that I call micro and macro engagement. And individuals that were at the leadership retreat last year, I did this with the 250, 300 chapter leaders, and having them reflect on, how do I integrate diversity and inclusion in my life? How do I integrate it at the chapter and local level? And how do I integrate it at the national level? And one thing that didn't happen is that we didn't have, majority of the staff wasn't there. And, I want the staff to also to be able to look at this and say, how do we even bring diversity and inclusion into our organization at all these different touch points? Sounds good? All right. So with the community rules, like I said, all about being respectful and appreciative of differences. I will be very transparent. I hate, and don't tell my kids I said hate because we're not allowed to say that in the house, but I hate the word tolerance, because tolerance has this negative connotation that you're just dealing with a difference. And you're like, well, I just really can't stand it, but because you like it, I'll deal with it. It's all about appreciation and not necessarily just trying to have this negative face and just dealing with it just because. So, want to be respectful of the differences, using I statements, not we, not they, but bringing it back to yourself, because we can only speak about ourselves. We hear many times people say we need to walk in someone's shoes. That is not remotely actually possible. We can be empathetic of what someone's going through, but we can never actually be in their shoes and know what they're going through. So always referencing yourself whenever you're speaking. Also, this room is a bubble, so this is a safe space, but being respectful that if people pour their heart out, no judgments, being open arms, and just being respectful of each other. Lean into the discomfort. That is normal. Many times, some people, it's the first time of them hearing of an instance, and that's okay. If you feel uncomfortable, that's a good thing. That means you're learning. When it's all about comfort, then it's, you're in that status quo state. So we definitely want you to be uncomfortable a little bit, and also addressing the issue, not a person. So if you hear something that you may disagree with, don't necessarily attack that person, but look at the issue and say, I hear what you're saying. Let me look at this issue and provide my perspective on it, based on my experience. All voices being heard. Actively listen. I cannot stress this enough. Many times we hear things and we want to give our opinion so much so that we're losing what other people are saying. So just actively pay attention to what your colleagues, and of course me, are saying. And then also personal care. Take care of yourself. If you feel that the conversation becomes too heavy, it's okay to leave. I will not be upset about it. That's part of the process, because, some people, they're not, you may not be ready for it, or it may bring up something that you went through in your life. It's okay for you to take a break and say, I just really need to go and reflect and deal with myself. That's part of the process within itself. Also, being honest, being open. Please participate. I cannot stress this enough. We're in a workshop. I shouldn't just be me talking. If I ask a question, please answer. And then don't disclose other people's information. Once again, going back to the I statement. So this is kind of these assumptions, which is interesting because I've been through a lot of different trainings. I've done trainings, and we always have these long lists of assumptions in which we tell people you technically are not supposed to lead with assumptions. But we throw these in here because some of these have been not necessarily proven, but kind of been accepted as, facts in a sense. But that's why I put in my assumptions for exploration, because it may be something you don't agree with, and it's okay to have that dialogue and that disagreement. So the first thing is that people are not born with prejudice. Prejudice and bias are learned through experience. So it's not, so don't think that, people were just born a certain way or in a disagreement. It's all about our environmental upbringing. It's about what we experienced in our lives. And some of it is positive, some of it is negative. And to be honest, all of us have unconscious bias in some form or fashion. No one's perfect. So, recognizing that there's no negative people, especially not in this room. We are all members of many social identity groups. So it's not diversity, and I'm not gonna speak too much to it, but some of us identify as this race that we're part of. Some of us identify as, the gender. Some of us identify as our religion. And, you also have the intersectionality in which we are representative of all different types of identities. And that is natural. That's what it is. And then also recognizing that oppression comes in many shapes and forms. Some people use oppression interchangeably with words such as discrimination and prejudice. It's not the same thing. They're all different. And recognizing that there is no hierarchy of oppression. Many of my colleagues like to say there's no such thing as the oppression Olympics. You have some people that say, well, we need to really look at, the issues in the African American community, and then you have some that say, well, no, what about same-sex marriage and this and that? There's no but. These are all issues that we need to be addressing, and opposed to trying to compete with each other, we need to look at kind of the larger framework and saying, what can we do within these spaces?